In April 2001, 240 people were sent into the vaults of Edinburgh Castle. None of them knew which rooms had centuries of ghost stories attached to them. None of them knew which rooms were simply empty cellars with no history at all. By the end of 10 days, more than half of them reported something they could not explain. And when researchers checked the results against the castle's records, the experiences clustered almost exactly where the old stories said they would. And this is the hidden history of the castle where the dead have never quite left. Edinburgh Castle sits on Castle Rock, an extinct volcanic plug rising roughly 130 meters above the city, with sheer cliffs protecting it on 3 sides. People have occupied this rock since at least the Iron Age. A fortress of some form has stood here since the reign of King David I in the 12th century, which means the site has been continuously fought over, occupied, and buried in human history for close to 900 years. The castle has been besieged at least 26 times, making it, by some historical counts, one of the most attacked buildings in the British Isles. It has served as a royal residence, a military garrison, a prison, and an execution site. Thousands of people died within its walls, from siege warfare, from imprisonment, from disease, and in at least one documented case, from being burned at the stake. Lady Janet Douglas, known as Glamis, was executed within sight of the castle in 1537. Convicted of witchcraft and treason on evidence that historians now widely regard as fabricated by political enemies of her family. Her death is one of the specific, documented tragedies that locals have long connected to the castle's reputation for unrest. Given this density of suffering, it is perhaps unsurprising that Edinburgh Castle has, for centuries, been described as one of the most haunted locations in Scotland, and by some accounts, in all of Europe. The most famous of the castle's reported spirits is the headless drummer. According to the legend, in 1650, sentries on the castle battlements reported the sound of drumming circling the courtyard at night. When they investigated, they found no drummer, only the sound itself. And according to some versions of the story, a glimpse of a boy in uniform with no head. That same year, Oliver Cromwell's army laid siege to Edinburgh Castle and captured it after a prolonged assault. The legend holds that the drummer's appearance was a warning the castle failed to heed, and that should he ever be seen again, it signals danger returning to the fortress. A second well-known story involves a piper sent into a network of tunnels said to run beneath the castle toward the Royal Mile, tasked with playing his pipes so that soldiers above ground could track his progress and confirm where the tunnel led. The piper was never found. People in Edinburgh still report hearing faint bagpipe music from beneath the street. Stories passed down, embellished over generations, impossible to verify against any contemporary written record. For most of their history, that is exactly how historians treated them. Colorful local tradition, nothing more. By the way, if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who finds the hidden side of history fascinating. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. New episode every week. Now, back to Edinburgh Castle. In April 2001, that changed, at least in terms of how seriously the question was tested. As part of the Edinburgh International Science Festival, Dr. Richard Wiseman, a psychologist at the University of Hertfordshire, designed an experiment to test whether reported hauntings in Edinburgh Castle had any measurable basis, or whether they were simply a product of suggestion and prior knowledge. Wiseman recruited 240 volunteers from the public. Every volunteer was screened in advance to confirm they had no prior knowledge of the castle's ghost stories and had never read about its specific haunted locations. Over a 10-day period, small groups were led through the castle's vaults, cellars, and dungeons. Some of the rooms they visited had long-standing reputations for paranormal activity. Others were ordinary spaces with no recorded history of hauntings at all, included specifically as a scientific control. The volunteers were given thermal images, geomagnetic sensors, temperature probes, and digital cameras, and were asked to record anything unusual they experienced. Physical sensations, emotional responses, anything out of the ordinary, without being told in advance which rooms were considered haunted and which were not. By the end of the 10-day study, just over half of all participants reported some kind of unexplained experience. The reported phenomena included sudden temperature drops, a sensation of being touched or watched, and in several cases, the impression of a shadow or figure moving at the edge of vision. In one particularly notable instance, an entire group, independently and without prompting one another, described seeing the same thing: a man in old-fashioned clothing and a leather apron moving through a doorway in one of the vaults. The detail that made the study scientifically significant was not the existence of strange reports. People report strange sensations in old buildings fairly often. It was where those reports occurred. When Wiseman's team cross-referenced the experiences against the castle's own internal records the volunteers never saw, the unexplained experiences clustered overwhelmingly in the specific rooms that had carried reputations for hauntings for generations, including chambers with no obvious modern signage or indication of their historical reputation. The control rooms, selected because they had no recorded history of paranormal claims, produced significantly fewer reports. Wiseman himself, speaking about the results at the time, noted that the pattern was striking. People reported far more experiences in the vaults that had long been considered haunted, and that something was clearly happening, even if the explanation for it remained unclear. He stopped short of claiming the results proved the existence of ghosts. What he did confirm was that the locations themselves appeared to produce a consistent, measurable pattern of human experience that closely tracked centuries-old oral tradition, without any of the 240 participants knowing that tradition existed. The study did not, and could not, prove that Edinburgh Castle is haunted in any supernatural sense. Geomagnetic anomalies, infrasound, drafts in old stone architecture, and simple environmental psychology in dark, enclosed spaces all remain plausible explanations for at least some of what was reported. But the consistency of the clustering, strangers with no prior knowledge, independently reporting concentrated experiences in the exact rooms the legends had pointed to for hundreds of years, has never been fully and conclusively explained either. Edinburgh Castle has not been formally besieged in centuries. The drummer has not been seen since the 1650s, according to the legend's own terms. The Piper's Tunnel was sealed long ago, but the castle's staff have, on occasion, reported their own unexplained moments, including a 2001 incident in which kitchen workers reported witnessing the sleeve of a 19th century soldier's uniform, displayed inside a sealed glass case, appear to move as though beating an invisible drum. 900 years of recorded conflict, 26 sieges, thousands of documented deaths within the same walls. A scientific study that found a measurable, repeating pattern, matching centuries-old testimony, without ever fully explaining why. Whatever is happening inside Edinburgh Castle, it has not stopped happening. And nearly a quarter century after one of the most rigorous tests ever applied to a haunted location, Science still has not produced a complete answer. Look around. History is everywhere. As always, see you in the past.